when one looks back on history, there's a lot of different ways that you could study history. You could study history by the decade. You could study history by the century. You could study history by, the monarch. Now, there was a famous saying that King George III had said to the revolutionaries who overthrew his government, the American revolutionaries. He says, "I hope that you don't suffer from the want of a monarchy." Now, when it comes to history, there's no doubt about it that when you have a monarchy, it's so much easier. I want to dive into the 1800s and the 1900s with Russian history, Russian and Ukraine history. When it comes to the history of Russia in the 1800s, you got 5 main Russian czars. It'll get you from 1801 to 1918. If you could just remember Alexander the First, Alexander the Second, Alexander the Third, and Nicholas the First and Nicholas the Second, that gets you from 1801 to 1918. Again, Alex the First, Alex the Second, Alex the Third, Nicholas the First, and Nicholas the Second. Memorize those 5 main Russian czars, and then that gets you on out of 1800s. That gets you out of the 1800s. Why is that important? Because if you go back farther, if you go back to 1613, this comes from a encyclopedia of world history. And you got this little chart here that says the House of Romanov. Right? The House of Romanov. And what the House of Romanov is telling us is that you got Michael in 1613 to 1645. Then you have Alexis 1645 to 1676. And then you got Theodore from 76 to 82. Then you got Ivan the Fifth from 82 to 89. Then you got Peter the First. Is that the Peter the Great? Peter the First, 1689 to 1725. So that's already the 5th czar. That's the 5th czar. And that, I guess in a way gets you through the 1600s. But then you got to memorize 7 czars for the 1700s. Catherine the First, 1725 to 1727. And then you got Peter the Second, 1727 to 1730. Then you got Anna, 1730 to 1740. Then you got Ivan the Sixth, 1740 to 1741. And then you get Elizabeth, 1741 to 1762. And then Peter the Third, 1762. Then Catherine the Second, 1762, 1796. And then Paul the First, 1796 to 1801. Actually, that's 13. That's a total of 13. So you had 5 in the 1600s, you had 5 in the 1800s, but you had 8. You had 8 in the 1700s, which isn't impossible, but it's just, shit. If you're going to have 8 goddamn czars in the 1700s, why not just have presidents every 4 or 8 years? The whole point of a czar is so they could take, 25 years. So the focus of this piece is before the 1800s. I want to get up to the 1800s. So after 1236, you had Alexander Nevsky is going to die. Moscow is going to become the capital of Russia. Moscow just got mentioned in 1147. 1147, Moscow was mentioned, and then 1187 is when the Ukraine was mentioned. The Ukraine has been an idea, has been around as an idea for 800 years. After 1236, Alexander Nevsky is going to die. Moscow is going to become the capital of Russia. And the Tatars are running Russia at the time. So the Tatar Sauce people were running Russia after 1263. 1478, you have Ivan III, which they call Ivan the Great. Ivan III is after, right? 1670, 1570. So we're in the 1600s. So Ivan the Fourth is going to kill a bunch of Novgorodians in 1570. Ivan the Terrible. But Ivan the Third, he had sacked Novgorod beforehand. So Ivan the Third is killing the historical spiritual homeland of the Russian people. That's how these Muscovites look at Novgorod. Novgorod is the homeland, spiritual land of the Russian people. Novgorod and Ladoga are the cities that the Russian, Swedish Vikings took over before they took over Kiev. In 862, they took over Novgorod and Ladoga. 882, they took over Kiev. 862, they took over Ladoga. That was Oleg and Rurik and Olga and Igor, who got ripped in half by the Drevlians. So in 1478, he's going to sack Novgorod. Ivan III, 1478, the Great, he sacks Novgorod, ships the upper elite to central Russia, rebuilds the Kremlin with Italian architects, married the niece of the last emperor of the Byzantine Empire. Yeah, I know why the Byzantine Empire went down, because of these fucking shitty-ass Russian czars, these Muscovites motherfuckers. So Ivan I was Ivan the Moneybags. Ivan I, Khalida. Khalida means moneybags. And then Ivan II is Ivan the Red. And then Ivan III is Ivan the Great. Then Ivan IV, well shit. Ivan IV was just goddamn terrible. Ivan IV, God, he was just awful. Ivan IV was awful, destructive. I mean, he was just terrible. Ivan IV killed Ivan V. So shit, Ivan IV destroyed his own fucking bloodlines. The Bolsheviks ended the Romanovs, and the Ruriks ended themselves. So Ivan IV destroyed his own bloodlines, and he sent Russia to hell with him. After 1505, Basil III is going to run things. Seems like things are nice with Basil III. You had like a Pax Rusana. But then 1570, Ivan the Terrible, you had this Muscovite killed thousands, if not tens of thousands of Novgorodians. The number is between 1,000 to 60,000, some shit like that. How many people got killed in Novgorod back in 1570? Oh, I don't know. Either 1,000 or 100,000. I'll say for certain 10,000, right? Probably tens of thousands. If, at the very least, 10,000 Novgorodians were killed, and then, if not tens of thousands. But that's who the fucking Muscovites are. They don't think you're Russians. They're conquering you. They're fucking oppressing you. They're saying, shut the fuck up. You're a bunch of goddamn nobody Eastern Slavs. You Eastern Slavs, shut the fuck up and get in line. You Slovenes, you Novgorodians, you Slovenes, you Eastern Slavs, you Polani, you Drevlians. Get in goddamn line, you Scythians, you Ukrainians, get in line. So, those are some events. Now we are at the 1800s? No. Now we are at the 1600s. 1645 to 1676, you have Alexis, the son of Michael Romanov, who ascended the throne at age 16. 1654, War with Poland. 1667, revision of the Russian Church. 1670 to 1671, you have a great peasant revolt in the southeast. Well, this is the Ukraine right here, led by Don Cossacks under Stephen Razin. It was suppressed with great difficulty. A great peasant result of 1670. The Cossacks. The Ukrainians are the Cossacks. Stephen Razin was suppressed with great difficulty. 1676, you got Theodore III. 1682, you got Ivan V, the son of Alexis's first wife, with whom was associated with Peter I. Okay, Peter the Great, 1689. So this is all about Peter the Great. Peter the Great, his mother was a Tartar, and his father was a hamster, and his mother was an elderberry, and his father smelt of elderberries, and his mother was a hamster. So, he's a Tartar. He's a Muscovite. What the hell does a Muscovite Tartar? Right? He's a Muscovite. What the hell would a Muscovite know about Russians? What's he know about the Slovenes? What's he know about Novgorod and Kiev? He don't know shit about Novgorod and Kiev. 1689 to 1725, Peter I the Great was effectively the sole ruler through Ivan V, lived through 1696. Peter, an intelligent but ruthless and headstrong ruler, Born in 1672, spent the first years of his reign in a process of self-education, chiefly technical and military. He established close relations with members of foreign colonies in Moscow and prepared for his later campaign through his military and naval games. Oh, he's just having games, just playing games, just playing games. 1697 to 98, Peter the Great returned to Moscow to suppress a revolt of the Streltsy, S-T-R-E-L-T-S-Y, the Streltsy, soldiers of the Moscow garrison, among whom there were many old believers, and then embarked upon his first reforms. At the same time, he prepared for war with Sweden for possession of the Baltic coast, having failed to induce the Western powers to continue the Turkish war beyond the year 1699. Treaty of Karlowitz peace was concluded with the Turks in 1700. Russia retained Azov. 1709, July 8th, the Battle of Poltava, a decisive battle in Russian history. Charles XII, having allied himself with Mazepa, the Cossack hetman, began to march on Moscow, but then turned off south at Poltava. At Poltava, Peter won a resounding victory which broke the power of Charles and marked the emergence of Russia in place of Sweden as the dominant power in the north. 1710-1711, war with Turkey due to pressure from Charles XII, a refugee in Turkey and France. The Russians were surrounded by the Turks on the Pruth River, and Peter had to buy himself off by the Treaty of the Pruth. 1711, Peter the Great was obliged to return Azov to the Turks. 1721, August 30, you got the Treaty of Nystadt between Russia and Sweden, concluding the Northern War. Russia acquired Livonia, Estonia in German land, part of the Karelia, and a number of Baltic islands. Thus, Peter had achieved his great purpose of acquiring a window on the Baltic, which would open up connections with the West. Russia now definitely took her place as a European power. 1725 to 1727, Catherine I is only going to rule for 2 years. Catherine I is a woman of lowly birth, but intelligent and energetic. During her short reign, the most influential member of the government was Prince Menshikov, one of Peter's closest collaborators. Catherine named her successor. Catherine named him, I guess, as her successor. So, war against the Turks, Ivan VI. Again, right? The house of Romanov is Michael, Alexis, Theodore, Ivan, Peter, Catherine, Peter, Anna, Ivan, Elizabeth, Peter, Catherine II, who was born Sophia, and then Paul I. It's too complicated. Too goddamn complicated. Now, when you got 5 main Russian czars, who do you got for the 1800s? Well, you got Alex I. Then you got Alex II. Then you got Alex III. And you got Nicholas I. Who's the last one? Oh, yeah, Nicholas II. And that gets you to 1918, the end of the Romanov bloodlines. So Alex I, he's going to reign. Russia is a Russian czar from 1801 to 1825. Nicholas I is 1825 to 1855. So the first Alexander, he reigns for 24 years. Nicholas I reigns for 30 years. Alex II reigns from 1855 to 1881, which is a 26-year dynasty. Then Alex III reigns from 1881 to 1894, which is a 13-year dynasty. And then Nicholas II, which is 1894 to 1917. That's a 23-year dynasty regime, realm, Reich, Rhine. Okay, 1918, Alexis dies, and that ends the Romanov bloodlines. So there you go, right? You got a 24-year dynasty, a 30-year dynasty, a 26-year dynasty. Alexander III actually had the shortest with a 13-year dynasty. Then Nicholas II picks it back up with a 23-year dynasty, right? So the loser of that group isn't Nicholas II, it's Alexander III. It's Alexander III. Nicholas II got 10 years on Alexander III. You only ran for 13 years, Alexander III. You pile of shit. You big old fat pile of shit. Let's end this off with an exciting 1756 to 1763, the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War in America was called the French and Indian War. The British and the French were fighting against each other, and the Native Americans were split between the two. The 7 Years' War, Russia took an active and important part in. The diplomatic revolution of 1756 brought Austria and France together, and that led to the estrangement of Russia and England and to the downfall of Bestaziev. Russia fought on the side of Austria and France against Frederick the Great, but made no direct gains as a result of the war. Let's go to the U.S. Revolution. France helped us out in the U.S. Revolution. If France hadn't helped us out, would we have won? We might not have even won. That's the same thing in Ukraine. So you're saying you'd rather goddamn King George III have, conquered us and reigned over us and us be oppressed by those English bastards? Russia was on our side, apparently. In the 7 Years' War, Russia was on the side of England. And then Peter III, 1762, a weak and incompetent ruler comes to power. Fucking Peter III, 1762. And now we're at 1801 to 1825. Alexander I. The great Alexander I. You know what he did? He stopped Napoleon in his tracks.